right, next up, I'm so excited to introduce our first keynote for the day. Leslie Pralle Keehn is not only a friend, but a wonderful colleague and collaborator. Prior to joining Prairie Lakes AEA as an instructional technology consultant, Leslie Pralle Keehn taught middle school and high school courses at Northeast Hamilton and Blairsburg, Iowa. After taking on a leadership role in professional development at Northeast Hamilton, Leslie helped lead her district's one-to-one iPad implementation. Leslie has classroom and professional experience and training in numerous areas, including gamification, blended learning, project-based learning, and standards-based grading. Leslie has received several awards and recognitions during her time in education. Leslie was named the ASCD Emerging Leader in 2015, and in 2016, she was named the National School Boards Association Top 20 to Watch list, as well as an Emerging Leader by the International Society for Technology in Education. Leslie is a regular local, state, and national presenter focusing on student creation, digital citizenship, the maker movement, and empowering young learners. Let's welcome Leslie Pralle Keehn.
So thank you for the welcome. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about a topic that I'm really passionate about, a topic that I have done a lot of work in the last few years, because what is more a bigger part of our lives than technology? And as we start to do that at a younger and younger age, right? We bought my youngest son his first iPad when he was 1.5 years for Christmas, which I know seems crazy, but he loved it. And so as I think about my 18-month-old with an iPad, I think about how important the topic of digital citizenship is. So I want to take a minute before I talk to you for a while and have you actually turn and talk to each other. And I want you to define digital citizenship. And yes, we can look up a definition, but what is your everyday, this is what I think of when I talk about digital citizenship definition of that term? So turn, talk to someone near you, make a new friend, maybe you brought a colleague, either way, have a quick conversation. What is digital citizenship? And yes, we are going to share out, so be prepared for that. Teacher wait time, I'll stand up here awkwardly until we get volunteers, just a heads up. Okay, go ahead and take a minute. I feel like you had plenty of time to come up with a really good definition. And I warned you ahead of time that we were going to share out, like 2 or 3 people. I want to share out how do you define digital citizenship?
Using digital resources responsibly and ethically.
Using digital resources responsibly and ethically. Short, to the point. I think that encompasses a lot. Any others? Does anyone have something to add to that? Yeah.
We talked about that it's just that the digital world is just another environment where you are a good citizen like you are in any other.
The digital world is just another environment where you are a good citizen just like anywhere else. Love that. Anybody else? Good, because that transitions really nicely into what I want to talk about next, so I'm going to end on that one. What I started to look at as I really started to dig into digital citizenship as an instructional technology consultant, coming out of a social studies classroom, I had 6th through 12th grade everything at Northeast Hamilton, yay small schools. I really had to take a look at digital citizenship. Why does it have to be different? We're citizens, right? And whether we are citizens of a connected internet world, whether we're citizens of our community, whether we're citizens of the earth, it still comes down to some of those basic principles. So I started to take a look, social studies teacher that I was, at how do I define citizenship? So when I sit down with my civics kids or my government kids, how do I define citizenship? And I went, okay, how do the experts define digital citizenship? Okay, and then, because why not, I said, let's take a look at Iowa character counts. Because I think that really starts to get to the heart of what do we want from our kids as people? And I started to put those together because the introduction of technology and social media has changed our communities, both physical and digital, forever. There's no going back from where we're at now. How we connect, collaborate, and communicate will never be the same. And so as we think about those things, I decided to organize them because in education, we always need more acronyms, right, into one that I like to call license. And what does it mean to be an exemplary member of a community, whether it is local, whether it is global, whether it is digital, whether it is analog? And so as I looked at citizenship and digital citizenship and the tenets of good character, these are the pieces that I came up with. I kind of cheat at the end that safety and ethics are together, but I started to think about this idea of a license. When you think about a license, whether it's a driver's license, a professional license, maybe a license plate, it gives you information about people. It gives you information about who I am. It tells you about what I'm qualified to do. It starts to get you thinking about the type of person that you are, the criteria that you've met to achieve that license, to have that license. So the components of a citizenship license or a global citizenship license help identify individuals and how they're perceived by others in a global world. Again, both digital and analog. You have that comprehensive knowledge as a teacher, as a learner, as a member of a community, of a model global citizen. So I want to talk to you about each of these a little bit today. Legitimacy, identity, community impact, education, networking, and of course, safety and ethics. Because I think while we have a lot of our digital citizenship conversation around maybe the first one and the last one, that legitimate sources, that idea of being safe online, those middle pieces are so crucial to how we develop good members of a community. So I want to talk to you a little bit about legitimacy. We have this idea of helping students understand their sources, helping students understand what is legitimate information, what online is credible. How are our sources? I see awesome clickbait all the time, right? Like, here's something about Hillary Clinton, here's something about Donald Trump. Politics is crazy these days. I don't know if you guys knew this. We have like this whole circus of politics going on right now, in case you've been sleeping under a rock. But in an election where social media has never been more important, we need to know how to be discerners of what is a legitimate news source, what is not. We need to be able to understand in our newspapers. We still get those. The print version, yeah, once in a while. We need to understand in our physical world as well, what's legitimate information? Something coming from a government source is something very different than something coming from someone's political blog, right? So as a teacher, we have to start to think about this. I was looking at, some of you may be familiar with the Clarity data that schools have the opportunity to take and get digital information. And while many of our high school students are being taught about how to use information appropriately online and how to decide if things are credible, we're asking students to start looking at that information in first, second, and third grade. And we're not having those conversations until middle school. So this is one of those things you're going to hear me say over and over that we need to start. Remember my 18-month-old with the iPad? That we're going to have to start thinking about at an earlier and earlier age. When I look at those statistics for elementary school, it's a little bit scary. When I look at the Iowa statistics, the number of elementary students that aren't being taught about these things. We need to be able to find the truth. We need to be able to find legitimate sources. We need to be able to understand that as teachers. The number of teachers that self-identify not really having a good understanding of digital citizenship, of how to find good sources, of how to source information. Again, there's that social studies thing. Sourcing information is huge when it comes to interpreting the world around us. We need to be able to find those things. I'm not going to dwell a long time on legitimacy because I said those are the ones we talk a lot about. It's those next ones that I feel like are really at the heart of what we talk about as good members of a global, digital, physical community, either way. So we need to talk a little bit about identity. Who am I? Well, I'm me, obviously. I'm also every tweet, every like, every follow. I'm every retweet, every hashtag that I use. I'm my username. I don't know if any of you would take me very seriously if at the end of my presentation I told you to email me at gumdrop73, right? Like, that's super awkward. So I have to think about these things. We have to have conversations with not only students about these things, but parents, all members of our community. My digital footprint tells my story. How I present myself online is just part of who I am. How I present myself in person is just part of who I am. Whether you're a parent, a friend, a colleague, college admissions board, people want to know who you are, and they're going to use not only the essays that you write, not only the references that you give, but they're going to ask you about or look at the footprint that you leave online. CareerBuilder.com did a survey, and it said that 50% of employers and managers were looking at people's social media before they hired. Those things are making an impact on whether or not you get into college, whether or not you get a job. That's a little scary, thinking about some of the things that my students are posting, and not that it's necessarily bad, but is it always good? Am I using my presence to make a positive impact so that when people say, oh, I know Leslie, this is what I know about her, am I building that positively, both in my community at home by being parts of organizations and in my communities online? I have a student named Courtney. Courtney was very shy. Courtney sat in the back of the room, and Courtney was very smart. And I know you're going, what do these pictures have to do with anything? Courtney was very intelligent, very quiet. And for my first 2 years of teaching, I will admit that I didn't know a lot about Courtney. Thought she was a really cool kid, but did I know a lot about her? No. And it wasn't until we did an assignment with stop motion animation that I realized there were a lot more layers to Courtney, and she was building an identity that I had no idea about. Courtney decided to help her classmates because she had done stop motion animation before. She actually spent lots of her free time designing music videos, using dolls and props at home to things like Katy Perry songs and Lady Gaga songs. And she had hundreds and hundreds of images to make these fantastic stop motion animation videos, a couple of clips you can see here. And she not only did that, but she wrote her own parodies of the songs about things that she was interested in. So there were some vampire ones, as you all can imagine, like a few years ago when that was, we're all big Edward Cullen fans, why not? So we have these parodies, and she showed another layer of herself to her classmates as she began to help them, but she had this whole YouTube channel of videos that she was creating outside the classroom. There were layers of her identity that we could have been taking advantage of, that we could have been getting to know. And as that came forward, I left the classroom. She was still there. Her teacher said, Courtney, we understand that you have other passions and interests. Courtney, with her English teacher and her social studies teacher, was given, they were doing some standards-based grading things. She was given an opportunity to use her extra time to start writing. She had these passions and interests that were really at her core being. So she started writing. She published her first novel at 16. You can buy it on Amazon. Published author, could physically buy her book because we found these other layers of her identity. She had passions and interests beyond the classroom. How cool would it be to bring these into the classroom? So her English teacher would look at it and edit. She continued. She is on the third book in that series of that first book she published and has started 2 other series. I want to say she has somewhere around a dozen books in the works, some finished, some in the editing process. She's 18 years old now. These are the parts of our students that we need to be tapping into, and she was able to identify with so many other areas. We were able to tap into different parts of her identity in both a physical and digital world. What about community impact? Whether the community we belong to is physical or digital, we have a duty to make a contribution to the group. As educators, we have not only a responsibility to model community contribution, but to inspire it in our students. We must be able to trust the members of our community. We need to be trustworthy members, meaning that we treat people fairly. We treat them with respect. When you think about the people in your community and the people you most want to work with, the people that you know are going to get things done, you know that they're respected individuals, you know they're trustworthy individuals, you know they're motivated individuals. And a good member of a global community digital and physical, is going to be able to do that. And not only are they going to be able to do that, but they're going to understand the differences of other communities. We need to be able to be a part of a global culture. We need to understand differences. We need to appreciate those differences, because the experiences I had growing up are very far from the experiences of one of my best friends who grew up in Louisiana. New Orleans came here after Katrina, right? I had no idea when I met him the impact that those conversations would have on my life. But I appreciate those differences, and I now bring them into my work, like this. When it comes to participating, you share your voice, you share your passion, you share your truth, and students who actively and positively participate in a community have ownership and pride in that community. And those then are successful future leaders, and we can easily tie those things together. I want to introduce you to Riley. Riley loves animals. Riley went to Iowa State a couple springs ago during Dead Week because there was a puppy mill awareness event. And she was interested in the topic. We had puppy mill awareness, and the idea was that they would bring puppy mill survivor dogs, rescue dogs, to campus so students could play with puppies to alleviate stress from having to take those finals. Finals. Fun times. Don't envy those people anymore. Glad I'm done with that, not gonna lie. So Riley finds this interest in puppies. Riley finds an interest then in speaking about puppy mills. Riley starts blogging about puppy mills. 3rd grade. Riley's teacher gives her an opportunity to continue writing about puppy mills. Her teacher connects her with an author that she found online. They begin having Skype conversations as a class about what it means to be a good member of a community. Riley decides, they're doing passion projects, talking about some project-based learning things in class. She goes, I really have an interest in fashion. I really have an interest in animals. How about I combine those things and start writing about them? So Riley starts designing dog clothes for puppy mill survivors because, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes when you're rescued from a puppy mill, the fur is all matted and they have to be shaved. And she didn't want the dogs to get cold, so Riley started making clothes for the dogs. Granted, only very small dogs because they're baby onesies turned into shirts, but it works. So through this connection of the teacher finding another author online, the author having a publicist, and the publicist saying, I've been reading Riley's blog, this is a really interesting story, Riley gets a phone call. Can we do an interview with you for the Ellen Show website? And then KCCI calls and says, that's a really cool story. Can we do an interview with you too? At 8 years old, 3rd grade, because of what her teacher did, because of Riley's passions, because she was writing online, because she was connecting with a community, both local and global, this 8-year-old was able to impact an entire nation with the story. 8 years old, a story to tell, a community to impact. Another little boy named Albert, who is right from down this area. Albert went to school at United, where my mom was a superintendent. Albert saw a story on the news about kids who didn't get to have the same school lunch as everyone else because their lunch bills weren't paid. Albert didn't think that was fair, saw a problem that was very local, said, I want to do something about this, started a GoFundMe campaign using Facebook, using Twitter, sharing it with people to raise money to help pay delinquent lunch accounts for other students so they didn't have to have a different lunch. Kids, elementary school kids, already making an impact. And we can tell countless stories like this. Whether they're elementary, middle, high school, whether it is your elderly neighbor, everyone has a story like this to tell. Everyone's impacting their community. We just have different ways of doing that. And when we can combine the digital and the physical, when we can take those online sources and Riley blogging about puppy mills, and then it getting put on a website, to something that she's doing. She ended up donating the clothes to the ARL here in Iowa. So something very physical and local tied to something very global was able to impact that much of a bigger audience. And as we think about those things, we need to decide how exactly we are going to continue to give those opportunities to our students. We have a very unique role as educators. And I don't want to talk about education as in K-12 education. I want to talk about education as in being a lifelong learner. We have an opportunity as educators to model lifelong learning for our students. It's one of the most important qualities we can model for our kids. Our children must know where to find accurate information. This is true. I mentioned that. They need to be discerning consumers of that information. They should strive to contribute credible information to our world. But we also want them to be informed. We want them to be able to ask questions. We want them to understand that life is a learning process. We don't stop when we graduate, no matter what level we graduate. I learn something new every day, and often it's from my kids. Education feeds growth, and a love of learning means that our students will be able to ask and answer questions every day of their lives. How do we continue to feed that in a digital world, in an analog world? Kids come to school every day. You have the opportunity to inspire them, to feed their passions, to model for them what it means to fail and get back up again and learn how to do it differently, learn how to do it better. One of the favorite things I've ever taken away from a conference is a fail fest. These people stood on this big round stage, so 360-degree stage, people everywhere, and you stood in the middle of this stage and you told the entire room about a time that you failed. Here's a time I fell flat on my face. But then you had to continue. How do I get back up from that? How did I fail, and then how did I get back up? How did I change what I was doing? How did I make it better? How did I turn that into a success story? And then they gave prizes to people with the best fail. I don't remember how they voted, like people just decided if there were judges, but it was really cool. This idea of celebrating not just failure. We can celebrate failure, that's cool, but we want to celebrate failure as a learning process. We can all learn and share and contribute. We're all part of a 21st century society. Education is such a huge piece of that. We have to produce and share as much as we consume. So as we continue being lifelong learners, we can share that with other people. It's part of a give and take process that benefits for the greater good. This is one of my favorite pictures. And it is not because I think the poem is perfectly done. I think it was part of a learning process about poetry. One of my colleagues, Aaron Olson, and I started an adventure called Connecting Creativity. And this one is from Out My Window, where we ask kids to appreciate the perspectives of others by writing and producing and being able to share their learning online. That project fell into the hands of a language arts teacher at a school up near Mason City, Pinecrest. It's a school for kids with behavior issues. Many of them also have other IEP special education needs. And they decided to write these poems. Many of these kids, not by the teachers there, but many of these kids have been written off by society as kids who were troublemakers, right? They're not allowed. They're not able to be in a traditional public school setting. You know what? Their needs were different, and that's okay. They still are producing amazing work. So this student, because I want to show you a different perspective, and this is something that taught me a lesson as we think about education and being a lifelong learner. It says, at Pinecrest, I only see the best. There's crops, and you might see the cops. What a different world from the one I live in. But I will tell you that every one of these students completed this assignment. Every one of these students then got up and did a Google Hangout with me and read me their poem that they had written. And we then published that to the web so that their voices could share their words with people all over the world. Aaron and I put it on our website. Those kids were inspired to keep learning those kids came back and said, oh my gosh, someone cares about what I did. That's being shared with how many other people? My work is on a website. My work is being talked about at statewide conferences. We actually invited them to share with us at 1-to-1 maybe, or iTech, I don't remember. Both great conferences. But kids that maybe you don't traditionally think of, when you think of model education, creating amazing work and being able to share that. That inspired a continued learning for them that was beyond a lesson on poetry. It was beyond a lesson on how to take a good photograph. Although if we look at the photograph and like how it splits into thirds, it's a great photo, right? Bigger than that was the power that was seen in the value of someone being excited about my work. I can share my learning. People care about that beyond just my classroom. Those are middle school kids. It's an elementary example. I worked up until this year with Scott McLeod, the Director of Innovation at Prairie Lakes. He's now in Colorado. But he was awesome at inspiring young students. So you see here your typical 100 days of school. We're counting out pop can tabs to 100. Took a video. Aiden posted it on his blog. And I will tell you, disclaimer, Aiden is my kid. So I know these things happened. So Aiden's doing his project. We posted on his blog because, yes, I use my children to experiment on, just like I'm sure many other educators do. I decided that my kids would be able to have a better understanding. This is my hope. So bear with me. The end results will be 10 years down the road. But I thought my kids would have a better understanding of their identity, of what it means to be a good producer, consumer of digital life, if I could help them hold their hand, model that from very early on. And if they could create a positive image for themselves at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, when they're 15, 16, 17, 18, hopefully they'll be less likely to want to damage that image with hopefully not too stupid of stuff later on. Right? If I've created this digital identity for myself, I don't want to mar that with something negative. I want to keep building on the positive. So that's my hope. So this is Aiden's video. He did his 100-day of school project. He posted online. Scott comments on it. This is a great way to celebrate the 100-day party, Aiden. I enjoyed hearing you count by tens in your video. So he showed some learning that he had done. He was counting by tens. He posted it online. He got a comment. 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, Aiden comes running in my bedroom with his iPad. Thanks, Scott, for that one. Aiden had a comment on his blog. Aiden was in kindergarten at the time. Mom! Yelling into a microphone is really loud. Mom! It's 6 o'clock on Saturday morning. What do you want? Scott commented on my blog. Huh? Scott. Okay. Can we read it? Will you sit down and read it with me? So at this point, I'm awake enough to say, yeah, sure, buddy, let's read this. So we sat down and we read his comment. He goes, oh my, can I go do more? Can I go write another post so that Scott can comment on that one too? So 6 o'clock on 6:15 by now, 6:15 on Saturday morning, I have a learner who's inspired to go do more because he'd done an activity at home, he'd been able to share it online, and someone had taken an interest in that. And these are the types of things that we can inspire in our young learners by being able to connect them to something physical as well as something digital. Now, he'd never met Scott up to that point, but Scott became like this legend in our house. So I'd come home and be like, oh, I had this really cool day at work. This is what we did. And Aiden would go, did Scott tell you that? No? Does that detract from its credibility? So Scott became this legend, which I tell you not because we need to discuss the resume of Scott McLeod, but because the impact that one person's comments can have on a learner are so significant. He got to meet Scott eventually. It was a very exciting day in our household, though I think at the time he was super shy and didn't really talk. So the impact that being able to connect those things can have on being able to connect people can have on a learner is so significant at any age. We need to talk about networking. Each of you in this room today had an opportunity to talk this morning. Hopefully you introduced yourself to someone new as you were coming in, as you were sitting down, as you were defining digital citizenship. You had this opportunity. That's networking. That's networking in our physical world. How many of you are on Twitter? That's like a higher percentage than I usually see. That was really exciting. How many of you are using the hashtag for today? How many of you are connecting through Twitter chats, through the hashtag, through Facebook with your parents maybe? How many of you are using Instagram or Pinterest to connect with other teachers, other educators? I love seeing the hands go up on a daily basis. There are awesome opportunities like this to network with others. Awesome opportunities where it's face-to-face. Those relationships are important. I'm a person who I'm really terrible at matching names to faces. Like, I will remember your face, I will never remember your name, and I'm terrible at it. I'm working on it. If I know your Twitter name and your profile picture and you look like that, like, yes, that's winning in my world. These interactions, when I can go and sit down with you and share a coffee, those are the things that I'm going to remember and be able to connect. But that's not always possible in our world. In a world where maybe not so much here, where I'm from, rural Iowa, right, where I have to drive at least 15 minutes to even find a grocery store, where I drive an hour to go shopping, right, that's not always accessible. Love my town, things are not always accessible. Whether it's budgets, whether it's distance, whatever, we can't always meet face-to-face. So we start taking advantage of these opportunities to do that online. And we can still continue to network. Some of my best friends are people I've never met in real life. I was just explaining this to a friend the other day. I have a group of moms. We all have kids born in March of 2006. We have been friends for 11 years now. I've met 2 of about 50 of them. But through the years, we've had the opportunity to weed out the creepers. We've had the opportunity to really tighten our group down to the people who really want to be a part of it and who care about each other. And we have a Facebook group to this day where we have conversations about everything from first day of school pictures to people going through a rough time at home, losing spouses, celebrating my kid had this opportunity at school. Every day we have this network built of moms who can ask each other questions. I have the same thing in my professional world. I have the opportunity to create relationships with people, whether it's my colleagues, my counterparts here at Heartland. We get to work together a lot. Sometimes we do it face-to-face. We have statewide meetings. Sometimes we do it digitally. Maybe we do a Google Hangout. But having those relationships, being able to network, people always think that a digital relationship isn't real. And I would tell you that digital relationships can be very real. That doesn't mean I don't want to meet you face-to-face. Some of my favorite teachers are people that I see 2 or 3 times a year at conferences. Some of them are in this room today. I'm going to count this as one of less than 6 times I will see them all year long. That doesn't make our relationship any less. And so as we continue to build those relationships, as we think about how we talk to our students about building those relationships, we want to think about networking. I had the opportunity to do both of those things in my classroom just once. My uncle, obviously a very physical relationship, works at John Deere. I see my uncle a couple times a year, but I knew he worked at John Deere. I knew we were talking about agriculture. Makes sense. So I reached out to him and said, what can we do? Can you connect me with someone? My kids are talking about agriculture in one class, and they were talking about Africa in another class. So I pulled those 2 classes together. My uncle connected me with this gentleman who works for John Deere in South Africa. And we set up a time for us to Skype. You can see we did dual screens. So we had him on Skype. We had his PowerPoint presentation on another screen. We had my classroom full of students who I was able, fortunately, to get all in the morning because obviously time zones with South Africa are a little funky. But a real-world relationship I had with my uncle led to an opportunity for my students to learn about the role of women farmers in Gambia and what John Deere was doing in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Africa, part of both their business. You can see their plant there on the far left, but being able to travel around. And he actually, the gentleman we spoke to, was from India. So we created this very global experience through a network of relationships. It was a physical network, it was a digital network, and they both came together to provide a great learning opportunity. As we think about the last piece, and I don't want to discredit the safety part at all. As I mentioned, my kids are online. There's a reason I put them online early. It's so I can hold their hand and make sure I know the conversations that they're having. Make sure I know that they are having positive conversations, leaving a positive image. I have the passwords. I have the accounts. It's all open. But when my daughter tweets and I'm not like telling her you need to go do this, like that's a win in my book. It's all connected to my email. They're my accounts, but my kids have a voice. My students had a voice. We don't want, right? We have this scary vision of the internet. Yes, I like my Bitmojis, but we have like this Joe Creeper person in the background thinking, who's going to get my kid? And those are very real concerns. These are conversations that have to be just as important, but they can't be the only conversation. They have to be part of the conversation. The safety of our students is probably our number one concern. For parents, for educators, those of us who serve both roles, it really hits home. We have to teach our kids how to be safe on a playground. We have to teach our kids how to be safe crossing the street. We have to teach our kids how to not answer the door for strangers, to keep their information private, but also respect the privacy of others. There are things that you don't need to share about other people. And just like we teach our kids to be safe crossing the street, just like we teach our kids to be safe on the playground, we teach them to be safe in an online world. I won't ever say I'm perfect at it. I'm up here talking to you about digital citizenship. I came home one day and my daughter tells me, these people are saying mean things to me. Like, what people? The game she had downloaded had a messaging component that I was completely unaware of. I'm far from perfect. So I said, first of all, you are really young for that. I didn't realize that was part of it. That's maybe not an app we're going to play with right now. And then we had a conversation about why that was not appropriate for her age, about why those people might be saying mean things. And it wasn't mean. It was like stupid, right? But when you're 6, stupid is really mean. It is mean. But we had an opportunity to have a conversation. We had an opportunity to take advantage of that learning moment. Those are so important. We can't just block. We can't just filter. We can't just shut the lid. We have to continue that with a conversation about why we do those things. And as we continue to think about safety, again, at the park, crossing the street, as you write on a blog, we have those conversations. We talk to our kids. We help them understand the why. We encourage our families to have those conversations. Digital citizenship falls largely on schools. It's so impactful, so important that we have opportunities for families to have those conversations as well. One of my favorite digital citizenship resources is Common Sense Media. How many of you are familiar with or use Common Sense Media? Yeah, awesome. Great resource. If you didn't raise your hand, either you're shy and that's cool, you didn't feel like it, or you aren't using it yet, and I really encourage you to check it out. They have family media agreements, and you can customize them. They have opportunities for families to have these conversations at the dinner table, wherever it's going to be, really hitting home on that community piece. Involving parents is crucial to this conversation. Involving your local librarians, involving local community members, church people, Boy Scout leaders. All of us are part of that digital conversation and the analog conversation. My son just joined Cub Scouts. That's an opportunity for him to learn and grow. And I would hope they would have similar sorts of conversations, both about how we grow up and are safe in the real world, as well as the digital world, because they're no longer separate. So as you think about each of these pieces and how they come together, I hope you'll think about the first one, being a good consumer of information. And I hope you'll think about the last one and how we have those conversations. Keeping our kids safe is so important. But I hope you'll think about those middle pieces as well. How do I define who I am? Because who I am is no longer just, hello, nice to meet you. My name is Leslie. Who I am is everything that you looked up about me online when you saw that I was speaking today. Maybe you didn't, because that was really like, whatever. But I Google people, because I'm like, who is this person, right? Like, what is that? Maybe you found a website, maybe you found my Twitter handle. Maybe you're like, oh, I recognize her profile picture. Hopefully I look like my profile picture. These things are all part of who we are. Hopefully you're helping your kids have an impact in the community, whether it's project-based learning, whether it's passion-based learning, whether we're giving kids an opportunity to identify real-world problems and solve them in authentic work. They can do those things on all levels. The stories I shared with you today were 8-year-olds making a huge impact in their community. And sharing it, using social media, using online tools to make a bigger impact. Encourage your kids to be lifelong learners. Model that for them. I learn each time I try to do a new presentation, each time I read a new book, each time I follow a new blog. And I model that for my students. I model that for the teachers I work with. You say, what are you reading right now? I can give you the book that I'm working on. Kids deserve it, by the way. Bracelet. Check it out if you haven't. Kids deserve all of these opportunities. And finally, that networking piece. Give them an opportunity to grow. Model for them what it looks like to be a networked individual, both in your community. Maybe you know business people that you can work with. Maybe your classroom partners with local businesses. That's amazing. That's an awesome way for them to network. But so too is connecting them online with people who share their interests. So too is connecting them with a world where they aren't the only one in their small little school that likes underwater basket weaving. Now I have friends who like underwater basket weaving as well. And I can build a relationship and a community around those things. And maybe go on to be best friends. I don't know. I got a little cheesy there for a minute. As you think about these things, I hope you'll think about them as a whole. I hope you'll think about what that license means, what it says about you. When all those pieces come together, just like your driver's license or your professional license, say something about you and the background that you have, the credentials that you carry. I hope you'll think about the things that a digital citizenship or a global citizenship license can say about you. Thank you. I have no idea where we're at on time.
All right, thank you. We have a few minutes for a couple of Q&A if you have some questions for Leslie.
You don't have to have questions.
I have a question for you, Leslie. I know that you work a lot with the teacher leadership, and so how are you spreading the message with those teacher leaders in your buildings or your districts that you work with?
Wow. Let's start with a question that I'm not sure I have an answer for. I'll be completely honest with you. I just am starting with my schools this year in their first year of teacher leadership, so we're sort of in that September, like, what are we even doing mode still. However, I'm really excited as a technology integration person to be able to partner in sort of that teacher leadership role, which is very different from my traditional role, so we can start folding them in together. We can model, as part of classroom instruction, our model teachers, our coaches, what it looks like to have technology and digital citizenship as part of the picture, as part of good pedagogy, not just as this separate piece where technology is over here, but as something embedded. So that's the goal.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else have some questions for Leslie? I have really good wait time.
Maybe they,
I really like your Riley story about her blogging online, and I'm working with some middle school students and having them blog, but we have their accounts locked down because we're in fear of not meeting compliance. How do we go around that? Like, how is Riley's heard throughout the world or whatever? How do they find her to meet up with her?
that's a good question.
I'm going to give Leslie credit. Riley is her daughter, and so that's very lucky that she has.
But her teacher does blog, and those blogs are shared. the students each have their own website, actually, in that classroom. So Riley is my kid. But again, her teacher did connect them. The teacher did have them blogging. Each kid has their own Weebly site. They have written their user agreements. I wish I could get you copies of what their school media policies are like. And if you want to give me your information, I maybe can do that for you. They never match names with pictures. So they have different protocols in place so that there are safety things that we pay attention to. They also are a Google school, so they are able to have accounts through Google so that when you have to sign up for things, I can maybe put you in touch with that teacher. That wasn't a very good answer, but I can get you the information. #lifelong learner.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Thank you for sharing some really empowering stories about some of the kids in her districts and her kids, because I think sometimes we want to remember that it's all about empowering those learners in this world, in this digital world. Also, she did reference Common Sense Media, and we do have a presentation with the Common Sense Media later on this afternoon. If that's something that maybe you aren't as familiar with, that you can check out their resources during their session this afternoon. Once again, thank you, and let's give another round of applause for both of our morning presentations.